On June 25th, 1876, a famous battle was fought. It's a battle known by many names. The Lakota Sioux call it the Battle of the Greasy Grass, but many people know it as the Battle of the Little Bighorn, owing to its closeness to the Little Bighorn River, and still others know it by the name of its most famous participant and refer to it simply as Custer's Last Stand. It is a little understood and controversial battle that is still argued and debated today, and one of the most interesting personalities of that battle was the single verified and documented survivor of the force that followed George Custer into combat that day, a horse named Comanche, who was the mount of the 36-year-old commander of Company I, Captain Myles Keogh. And while the survival of his horse means that his name is relatively well remembered, the military career of Myles Keogh is much less remembered, and that is too bad because he had an exceptional military career that helps to illustrate exactly how severe the loss to the U.S. Army was of those men who died along the Little Bighorn River. It is history that deserves to be remembered. Myles Keogh was one of 12 siblings, born in Lochlinbridge, County Carlock, Ireland, in March 1840. His father, John Keogh, was a gentleman farmer, and they grew barley, meaning they were not as powerfully affected as some by the poverty and starvation of the Great Potato Famine that struck Ireland between 1845 and 1849. Still, he was afflicted with typhoid fever as a child, an illness often associated with poverty and the famine. 2 of his siblings died of the illness. Some have claimed that his father had been an officer in the 5th Royal Irish Lancers, although there is no proof of that. He was, however, a restless youth, and was said to be inspired by the novel Charles O'Malley, the Irish Dragoon, a popular rollicking adventure novel about an Irishman fighting in the Napoleonic Wars. In 1860, at the age of 20, Myles Keogh was a young man looking for adventure, and there was adventure to be had. Italy had been unified under the Roman Empire for some 700 years, but after the fall of the empire it had gradually developed into a system of disparate city-states, with parts occasionally dominated by larger European empires. By the 19th century, there was a growing movement for unification of a single Italian state. But one obstacle was the Papal States, a temporal kingdom under the direct sovereign rule of the Pope that dominated a section of central Italy. Worldwide Catholics were wary of the Italian nationalists, whom they saw as a threat to the kingdom of the Pope. In 1860, Pope Pius IX sent a call throughout Catholic Christendom for volunteers to protect the Papal States. The call was received with particular enthusiasm in Ireland, where 1,400 volunteers traveled to Rome, forming an Irish battalion. Among those volunteers was Myles Keogh, who was given the rank of lieutenant. 1860 was a complex time in Italy during the chaotic period of struggle for unification in Italy called the Risorgimento. The Papal States, whose army was rather small, was sandwiched between competing elements. The Count of Cavour, the Prime Minister of the Kingdom of Piedmont Sardinia, was a leading figure in the Italian unification movement, but he wanted unification under King Victor Emmanuel II of Sardinia. In the south, a more radical revolutionary named Giuseppe Garibaldi had successfully invaded the Kingdom of the Two Sicilies and was planning to invade Naples. Cavour thus had 2 reasons to invade the Papal States. First, he wanted to prevent further foreign intervention and Austrian attempts to retake parts of the peninsula. And second, he needed to dominate the unification movement in order to limit the power of its more radical elements. On September 11, 1860, the Army of Sardinia invaded the Papal States with 35,000 men. The Papal States had only 15,000 troops to oppose them. The Papal Army was commanded by a former French general named Christophe de Lamoricière. Lamoricière realized that the only hope for the Papal States to resist the invasion was if a foreign power intervened, and so raced to the port of Ancona, the main Adriatic port still in Papal hands, and the only reasonable place where a foreign power, likely Austria, might be able to land an army. Lamoricière was defeated in a lopsided field battle, the Battle of Castelfidardo, on September 18th, but Keogh and the Irishmen were in Ancona, which was besieged by the Piedmontese navy. Lamoricière managed to reach Ancona with a few survivors of Castelfidardo, but Ancona was surrounded. The bombardment by the Piedmontese navy and siege train was fantastic, and despite desperate fighting, the garrison of Ancona was obliged to surrender when naval bombardment caused the explosion of the magazine of the fort of Lanterna in the harbor. Keogh and his fellow Irishmen were captured and quickly paroled. Keogh had distinguished himself in the fight and was awarded 2 medals for gallantry by Pope Pius IX. The medal Pro Petrosede, Latin for Peter's Chair, and the Order of St. Gregory the Great. Myles Keogh's medal, Pro Petrosede, was sold at auction in 2006. Moreover, Keogh was offered a position as a lieutenant in the Order of St. Patrick in the Papal Guards, which would have been a secure position for the young Irishman. But by then he was disillusioned with papal politics, and peacetime service did not excite him. But a new opportunity had arisen. Many officers of the U.S. Army had joined the Confederacy at the outbreak of the U.S. Civil War, and the Federal Army was rapidly expanding. There was a critical shortage of experienced officers, and the Lincoln administration sent John Hughes, the Irish-American Bishop of New York, to Europe to recruit experienced officers among the veterans of the Papal Wars. For the second time in his young life, Myles Keogh, just 22 years old, was being offered a foreign commission and a chance for adventure. After a brief stop in Ireland, he sailed with two of his comrades from the Papal Army for the United States and its bloody war. Myles Keogh's service in the Civil War was nothing short of extraordinary. He served in more than 30 major engagements, more than 80 engagements overall, virtually every important engagement from 1862 on, and he impressed every officer that he ran into. Major General Jacob Cox said of him, "He was born a soldier." Keogh and his two comrades were commissioned captains and assigned to the staff of Brigadier General James Shields, who had been born in Ireland, had immigrated to America, and had served in the U.S. Senate for both Illinois and Minnesota. At his first engagement, the day before the Battle of Port Republic in the Shenandoah Campaign, Keogh was with a detachment under Colonel Samuel Carroll that surprised Confederate General Stonewall Jackson and his staff in the town of Port Republic. Jackson only managed to escape because his horse, Little Sorrel, had been saddled so that he could ride to church. Keogh was briefly on the staff of General George McClellan at McClellan's request. McClellan said of him, "His record has been remarkable for the short time he had been in the Army." After the Battle of Antietam, Keogh was next assigned to the staff of Brigadier General John Buford, a veteran cavalryman, who described Keogh as dashing, gallant, and daring. Although a staff officer, Keogh never passed up an opportunity to distinguish himself in battle. During the daring Stoneman's Raid in 1863, his detachment captured 15 supply wagons. After the raid, Buford was promoted to command the cavalry division, where he particularly lauded the performance of his staff, including Myles Keogh. Keogh then accompanied Buford at the June 1863 Battle of Brandy Station, the largest predominantly cavalry engagement of the U.S. Civil War, and the battle in which the Union cavalry established their reputation. And then again at the Battle of Upperville, another major cavalry engagement. But Keogh most distinguished himself on July 1st, 1863, at the start of the Great Battle of Gettysburg, in what was perhaps the most important cavalry action of the Civil War. The first day of Gettysburg was a testament to General John Buford, who realized before all others that his cavalry were facing the main force of the Army of Northern Virginia. His cavalry division doggedly defended the high ground, 3 ridges west of the town, against a vastly superior force, realizing that was the key to victory at the climactic battle that could literally determine the outcome of the war. Outnumbered nearly 3-1, Buford's division held long enough for the Union infantry of the 1st Corps, under Major General John Reynolds, to arrive. It was a desperate delaying action. When Buford saw Reynolds' troops approaching, he reportedly said, "Now we can hold this place." It was a defining moment of the defining battle of the war. The New York Times later said of John Buford, "He was considered the best field cavalry commander in the service, and was noted for his coolness and judgment under fire." Myles Keogh distinguished himself in that desperate action and was rewarded with a brevet promotion to major for gallant and meritorious service. Keogh continued with Buford's cavalry through a number of small engagements, pursuing Lee after Gettysburg, but the general's health began to decline. Buford died, possibly of the same typhoid fever that Keogh had suffered from in his youth, in December. It is a testament to the close relationship between the two that Buford literally died in Keogh's arms. Keogh then served in the West, where he was the aide of General Stoneman. Keogh accompanied Stoneman on his daring 1864 behind-the-lines raid to free Union prisoners, and was captured with the general at the Battle of Sunshine Church, where both their horses were shot out from under them. After 2 months in captivity, both were exchanged. Keogh wrote to his sister that the quick exchange likely saved his life, as his health was failing. After recovering, Keogh received another brevet promotion to lieutenant colonel for gallantry during the Battle of Dallas at the end of May 1864. Stoneman said of Keogh, "Major Keogh is one of the most superior young officers in the Army." Stoneman's superior, Major General John Schofield, was just as effusive in his praise, saying that Keogh was "one of the most gallant and efficient young cavalry officers I have ever known." Keogh's service during the Civil War was exemplary, and by any standard, it deserved to be remembered. But the young man, a lieutenant colonel at just the age of 24 at the end of the Civil War, who had already fought in 2 wars on 2 continents, still had one more war to fight. After the war, Keogh stayed with the Army, and while a brevet lieutenant colonel, held the regular rank of captain and was made commander of Company I of the newly constituted 7th United States Cavalry. Keogh saw extensive service in the Indian Wars, where he was frustrated by the unconventional warfare and difficulty tracking Indians and bringing them to battle. Like many frontier officers, he sometimes drank too much. He was often on detached duty and missed the 1874 Black Hills expedition because he was on an extended leave visiting his home in Ireland, which he had inherited from his parents and which he deeded to his sister. Keogh was the senior captain of Custer's 5 companies at the Battle of the Little Bighorn, June 25, 1876. While the battle has been heavily studied, the details are still not clear, as there were no surviving witnesses of the companies that accompanied Custer into battle. Accounts from their adversaries were taken years after the battle and contradict one another. It appears that Keogh died in his own last stand, as his body was found among a cluster with 2 sergeants, the bugler and the standard-bearer of Company I. His horse, Comanche, was found alive and nursed back to health. The horse had a wound matching a wound on Keogh's leg that implied that Keogh had been hit originally while mounted. Comanche's wounds were evidence of the fierceness of Keogh's fight. There is little clear record about Myles Keogh's relationship with his commander at the Battle of the Little Bighorn, George Armstrong Custer. Some have argued that they were close, but the record doesn't necessarily support that, and the fact is that the colorful and bombastic George Custer was pretty much the opposite personality of Myles Keogh's idol, John Buford. What is clear is that Myles Keogh was one of the most experienced cavalry officers in the United States Army, and he deserved to be remembered for more than the strange happenstance that his horse happened to survive the battle. His extraordinary military career is a testament to the loss of experience that the U.S. Army suffered with the loss of so many officers and men at the Battle of the Little Bighorn. And his military experience, which spans 3 wars on 2 continents, deserves to be remembered. I hope you enjoyed this episode of The History Guy, short snippets of forgotten history between 10 and 15 minutes long. And if you did enjoy, please go ahead and click that thumbs up button. If you have any questions or comments or suggestions for future episodes, please write those in the comment section. I will be happy to personally respond. Be sure to follow The History Guy on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and check out our merchandise on teespring.com. And if you'd like more episodes on forgotten history, all you need to do is subscribe.